Did you notice how the conversation suddenly changed? Not about what Princess Leonor said. Not about where she was going. Not even about her military training. Instead, people started asking one question. Why did security around Princess Leonor appear different last night? And the more I looked into that question, the more fascinating it became. Because when it comes to modern royalty, the most important stories are often the ones nobody officially confirms. Think about it. When a palace wants attention, it releases photographs. When it wants admiration, it organizes public appearances. But when security changes, silence. And that silence is exactly why so many people are talking right now. Because whether you're looking at the Spanish royal family, Prince William and Catherine in Britain, or even some of the biggest public figures on the internet, there's one universal rule. The tighter the security, the bigger the concern behind the scenes. Now, before we go further, I want to make something clear. There has been no official announcement confirming any dramatic security event involving Princess Leonor. But that's actually what makes this story interesting. Because royal watchers have learned something over the years. Palaces rarely explain security decisions. They simply make them, and the public notices afterward. The question is, what would make a future queen require additional protection at this particular moment? And honestly, I think the answer tells us far more about Leonor's growing role than people realize. If you're new to Leonor's story, subscribe, I post every day. Because what we're witnessing isn't just another royal headline. We're watching the transformation of a princess into the future face of a monarchy. And that changes everything. Now here's the detail that caught my attention. Most people assume royal security exists to protect individuals. That's true, but it's only half the story. The other half, royal security protects symbols. And right now, Princess Leonor isn't just a person. She's becoming one of the most important symbols in Spain. That's a massive difference. Years ago, Leonor could attend events and remain largely in the background. People knew who she was. People respected her, but she wasn't carrying the weight she carries today. Now every appearance matters. Every photograph matters. Every gesture matters. And every mistake matters. That's the hidden cost of becoming heir to the throne. The higher you rise, the less freedom you have. And honestly, I don't think enough people talk about that. Everyone loves the glamour, the uniforms, the ceremonies, the applause, but nobody talks about the invisible walls that gradually close around royal heirs. Imagine being watched everywhere. Imagine knowing that every expression could become a headline. Imagine realizing that your security team evaluates risks you don't even know exist. That's not a normal life. That's the reality of modern monarchy. And I think Leonor understands that better than most people her age. One reason I believe public interest in her has exploded recently is because she represents something unusual. She's caught between two worlds. On one side, she's a young woman experiencing milestones that millions of people her age experience. On the other side, she's preparing for responsibilities that almost nobody on earth will ever understand. That's a difficult balancing act. And the more visible she becomes, the more complicated that balancing act gets. Now here's my hot take. I don't think the real story is whether security increased. I think the real story is why people immediately believed it could have happened. Think about that for a second. People heard whispers. People saw discussions online, and many instantly said, "That sounds believable." Why? Because deep down, everyone understands Leonor's importance is growing. The public may not know every security detail, but they can feel the shift. They can see her moving closer and closer to the center of Spain's future. And that creates pressure. A lot of pressure. In fact, I would argue that Leonor is entering the most challenging stage of her public life so far. Not because of any specific threat. Not because of any single event. But because expectations are multiplying. Every year, more people analyze her. More people compare her. More people project hopes onto her. And that's where things become interesting. Because history shows us something. The transition from princess to future monarch is rarely smooth. There are always tests. There are always moments of scrutiny. There are always periods when the public begins paying closer attention. What we're seeing now may simply be part of that process. And if that's true, then increased security would not be surprising at all. Not because something dramatic happened, but because Leonor's position is changing. Slowly, steadily, and perhaps faster than many expected. Another thing I find fascinating is how different royal security looks in 2026 compared to previous generations. Years ago, protection focused primarily on physical safety. Today, the battlefield is much larger. digital threats, online harassment, location tracking, information leaks, artificial intelligence, deepfakes. The challenges facing modern public figures are completely different. That's why when people discuss security, they're often imagining bodyguards. But real protection today involves far more than what cameras can capture. And that's another reason I think stories like this resonate. Because they remind us that modern royalty exists in a world that changes every day. Now let me ask you something. Have you noticed how Leonor's public image has evolved recently? A few years ago, coverage often focused on her future. Now coverage focuses on her present. That's a subtle but important difference. She's no longer being discussed only as, one day. She's being discussed as, right now. And when that shift happens, institutions adapt. Expectations adapt. Security adapts. Everything adapts. That's why I believe the conversation surrounding Leonor has entered a new phase. Not a dramatic phase. Not a scandalous phase. A serious phase. The phase where people begin looking at her not simply as a princess, but as a future queen whose decisions, appearances, and development matter in real time. And that responsibility is enormous. Sometimes I wonder whether people fully appreciate how unusual that experience must be. Most young adults are discovering themselves. Leonor is doing that while an entire nation watches. Most young adults can make mistakes privately. Leonor cannot. Most young adults can disappear for a weekend without headlines. Leonor cannot. That's a burden very few people would willingly choose. And yet, by all appearances, she continues moving forward. Which may explain why so many people are paying attention. Not because of rumors, not because of speculation, but because they recognize a transition happening before their eyes. A future monarch stepping gradually into a larger role. And whether security changed last night or not, that bigger story remains the same. The spotlight around Princess Leonor is growing. The expectations are growing. The responsibilities are growing. And with every passing month, the future feels less distant than it once did. That's what makes this moment fascinating. Not the rumor, not the mystery, but what the rumor reveals about public perception. People sense change. They sense importance. They sense that Leonor's next chapter may be arriving sooner than many expected. And in the world of royalty, perception often becomes part of the story itself. What do you think? Are we simply seeing increased public interest around Princess Leonor, or do you believe her role inside the Spanish monarchy is evolving faster than people realize? I'd love to hear your perspective because this conversation is only getting bigger.